So we're all native speakers of some kind of language, right? And we are all going to make so many mistakes, regardless of what language that is, whether it is our first language, our second language, our third language, our fifth, our 50th, whatever it is, we're gonna make a lot of mistakes. And I am really motivated about this topic because I get asked so many times by my students, by other learners, by other teachers, by everyone, like, how do I speak perfectly? How do I master my language? And the answer to that is you're never going to master a language in the sense that you're going to be finished learning unless you decide that the level that you have is enough. Because even native speakers, so this is the other thing, right, is that we want to sound like native speakers. Like, I'm a native speaker of English, so I sound this way, but my English is by no means perfect. It's by no means free of errors, of grammatical mistakes, of whatever that is, because speaking like a native speaker does not mean speaking perfectly, like speaking grammatically. Because if you spoke grammatically, you would not sound like a native speaker. Native speakers make native mistakes. So one of my favorite mistakes in English is, and it's not even a mistake really, like, if you study from grammar, it's like, oh, it's a mistake because it's not this way, it has to be this way. Well, when you think of the purpose of language is to communicate an idea, and it's to communicate it effectively and articulately, then it's really not a mistake, it's just an evolution in the language, if you will. So one of my favorite mistakes, or, evolutions in language, is the word they in English, because we use the word they, and although it is third person plural, it's also becoming third person singular. And I know, so many people, it's not third person singular, but the way that we use it in speech, we do use it that way, as a third person singular. So what I mean by that is we'll say, like, oh, that person there, they are doing this, or talking about like a hypothetical person, they would be this way, or they would do this, they are this way, whatever it is. We use they as a third person singular because we are avoiding the gender assignment, right? We're avoiding saying he or she, and then also avoiding the, like, it, because we want to refer to that person as a person rather than an object, or like an animal, or like it, whatever. Even animals usually use like gender, but it's avoiding that it, and then it's avoiding also assigning a gender to something that we don't know. So it's like in formal writing, you will say, oh, like he or she does this because whatever it is, right? Instead of saying that in formal writing, we can, at least I do, manipulate the language so that we can use like they instead of saying like he or she does this. You can say like they do this, just talking about it as like a group, as a hypothetical instead. But when we're speaking, it's okay to say, instead of like he or she, just to say they and use it as a third person singular, because it's just the way that we speak, at least over here where I am. And yeah, so I love that example of a mistake because it's not a mistake when you look at it from a linguistic perspective. Like, everything evolves. If you went and looked at English from 100 years ago, the things that were correct then are not necessarily all of the things that are correct now. There's just new structures, there's new words, there's new grammar rules, there's grammar rules that we don't use anymore, there's all of this evolution of language, okay? So, if you want to sound like a native speaker, you're not going to memorize all the grammar, you're not going to speak perfectly. Like, yes, you are going to learn grammar, and you are going to, practice reading and writing and speaking and listening, but you're not going to speak grammatically perfectly. I don't even know if that is grammatically correct, but you're not going to speak in a way that is grammatically perfect, right? You are going to speak in a way that people natively speak, a way that comes out naturally, which is full of mistakes, if you will. So I want you to shift your mindset, right? From, okay, I gotta be perfect, to, I don't need to be perfect, I need to be understood. I need to communicate well, clearly, articulately. I need to know enough grammar, like I need to know the foundations. I need to practice, like what do I read? How is that structured? Listen to other people. How do they speak? Like what adjustments do we make? And also, who cares if you sound like a native speaker? So native speakers, even if we think of like native speakers so I'm in California. If I spoke to a native speaker on the East Coast, they're gonna sound completely different, right? Different accent, maybe even some different vocabulary, and then if I spoke to someone in England, in Australia, and wherever it is, like they're going to sound different than I do. They're going to speak differently than I do. And none of it is right or wrong. It's just a different way of speaking. So even with like wanting to sound like a native speaker, like my languages that I learned that are my second language, my third language, like Spanish and French, I do not sound like a native speaker in those languages, and I don't have any desire to. Like, I love my languages, and I speak in, well, at least in Spanish. My French is not quite there yet, but my Spanish, like, I don't sound like a native speaker. I make non-native mistakes because I learned it non-natively. I learned it through grammar and through reading and through all of those things, and less through speaking, like less through immersion, even though I had some of those elements of it. But it doesn't matter to me that I don't sound like a native speaker, because I just have the level that I want. And in writing, of course, you can sound however you want, because you've got time to formulate your ideas and your paragraphs and all of that. And you can rewrite it and you can do edits and all of that. But it's speaking, it just doesn't matter, at least not to me. Yes, it matters to sound good, to sound like what you're talking about, to sound like you can speak in a way that is easily understood. But it doesn't matter if you make a mistake that is not native, because native speakers make mistakes too. They're just different types of mistakes. It's what makes the mistakes that non-native speakers make not okay, and then the mistakes that native speakers make okay. It doesn't make any sense. Like, as long as, they can be at the same level of proficiency, just making different mistakes. So why would native mistakes be more acceptable than non-native mistakes? Because there's more native speakers, and because we are more accustomed to hearing native mistakes. So we just hear non-native mistakes and we're just like, oh, that doesn't sound quite right, because that's not native. But what if they can communicate at the same level and they just make different types of mistakes? Is one better than the other? For me, I don't think so. I think it's perfectly fine to make non-native mistakes, because it doesn't matter if you make some kind of mistake, because if you are sounding native, you're only, you're just taking on those native mistakes to sound native. So I am sure that you guys have plenty of thoughts on this topic. So I will leave it up to you all down below. If there are any questions or comments or whatever you think about this topic, you can feel free to leave it down below. And I will see you guys back here next time. Bye.